You're good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our community stories. This month, we're featuring East End, and we have 3 residents with us to share about their communities. Again, this is brought to you by the City of Durham Neighborhood Improvement Services. Thank you to our city management and leadership for supporting this project and this work and this space to learn and share about the stories of Black and African American communities in Durham. This is all part of our equitable community engagement work with the city, and you can learn about that at our website, durhamcommunityengagement.org. Today's speakers are Michael Jones Sr., Ed Allen, and Arthur Everett. I don't think Iris Fisher has been able to join us, but at this point I will turn it over to them, and they'll share all of their stories, and then we'll be back in a little bit to ask questions. Again, as always, please share your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them towards the end of today's event. So over to you, Mr. Jones.
Hello, my name is Michael Jones. I am the owner of LSD Jones and Sons Funeral Home, and our funeral home has been in the East End area since 1935. And I'm the 3rd generation, and I'm semi-retired. So my daughter, Nina Mason, and my son, Michael Jr. are operating the funeral home now. So we've been in the East End area for a very long time. We've seen the changes, good, bad, and ugly. But like I said, we're still proud that proud to be part of the East End community, and we're looking forward to everything that has to do with East End. Is Everett?
Hi, my name is Arthur Everett. I'm a minister, and I've been living in North Durham for 60 years, and I'm going to be sharing some of the profound changes that has been made that I've observed through my eyes through the history of time. And right now I am retired and enjoying that part of life. But anyway, I wanted to make a contribution to the history before I depart from this world, be sure that there are some accuracies to the reports that is being given. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel to share in today.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, this is Ed Allen. I was born and raised at 607 Dowd Street, right in the heart of the East End community, which I thoroughly enjoyed my childhood and my early youth there in that community. So I'm here today because I want to revisit some of my memories about that great community that I grew up in, and know about some of the great people that I have not met in many years and would like to meet them if they're still alive. So thank you very much. I'm glad that I signed up for this.
You start the slideshow now. Now, this is the area which we call East End. Not a very large area, and some of the names have changed to some of the streets, but the primary street was Dowd Street. And like I said, the corner of Dowd and Elizabeth, that was a commercial center there. You know, there was a grocery store, a laundromat, a restaurant. Was our funeral home was there. There was a barber shop, a dry cleaners, a shoe shine parlor, a cab stand. So there was a lot of activity going on at that corner. It was basically the center of the area. One of the old timers told me that this was the area in which they first put a street light in the neighborhood, probably back in the 30s and 40s. And everybody would come up at night when they got off from work and stand up under the street light and down in Elizabeth Street. So that's how it became probably the beginning of the community. And then, like I said, the businesses grew up around it. Primary people that lived in the area were factory workers and more domestic workers. Of course, people always know, I guess they do now, that Durham was a big tobacco town. There were warehouses, now they're apartment complexes, and American Tobacco and Liggett & Myers were two of the largest tobacco companies in the world. And they had their headquarters here, and they made tobacco. Also, there was what they called Golden Belt Manufacturing Company. People don't know what that was. They made the paper products for the cigarettes. So, you know, the packaging for the cigarettes was made at Golden Belt. That's down on Main Street. I think it's now office buildings and a lot of other things going on there at Golden Belt. And of course, American Tobacco, they've turned that into a office complex, restaurants and office complex downtown Durham. Liggett & Myers also, their buildings have been turned into office space and other opportunities for businesses. But back in the day, that's where you wanted to work. Liggett & Myers and Tobacco, they had a very strong union. And these people were making, for the time, they were making very good money. I believe they finally left Durham, both of them left Durham in 1985. And I've talked to some of the old timers that were working there, and they said they still can't make the kind of money the day that they were making back in 1985 at Liggett & Myers. But it was, and like I said, a lot of the people that lived in East End neighborhood worked at Liggett & Myers, and they were able to work and live a comfortable life. They were able to own their own homes. There was a lot of home ownership at that time in East End neighborhood because of the factories. People primarily worked at the factories. They worked in the domestic, but they also worked at Duke Hospital and the university. That was a big employer of the people at that time. What you have to understand is that these were not necessarily well-educated people, but were hardworking people and were able to make a very good living without a college degree, some not even without a high school degree. But now, like I said, times have changed. But those are what they had to do at that time. Arthur, you want to say anything?
No, I think you covered it very well as it relates to the factories. Again, they also made part of those buildings living complexes for now. And the historical part of that is they still keeping the front, some of the front, like Liberty Warehouse, open to the public to let them know that this was a prominent place. So yes, I think you covered that very well. My mother actually worked into Liggett & Myers as a tobacco handler and a sweeper for the floors and stuff of that nature. So as you said, it wasn't really, she only had a third grade education, but she was bringing home a fairly good salary for her 5 children.
And also there was a lot of part-time work back then, you know, in the green season when the tobacco came in, that they would, you know, hire a lot of people to handle the tobacco when it came in the fall.
That's
so
right.
There was another seasonal work there, you know, that was good. And hopefully if you worked there and you did good, you got a job at the factory. That was always how you got to the factory and to the good permanent jobs. You worked in the green season. Now, I believe the picture we have here is of Mechanics and Farmers Bank. And that's Mr. Wheeler down in the far right corner. I don't know the other two gentlemen, but in the far right corner was Mr. Wheeler. This was started, you know, way years ago, I think maybe close to the turn of the century. And Mutual Community Savings Loan, that building there, the hotel, that's where they were located. But they started out as in an office in Mechanics and Farmers Bank. People don't understand, there was no such thing as a mortgage company back then.
Right.
If you needed a mortgage, you had to go to a savings and loan.
Right.
And that's where the home savings and loan building is. You know, there were 4 savings and loans, and they did all the real estate building. Banks didn't do that. The savings and loan did that. So what they did, they started a black savings and loan so that people could get a homeowner's loan.
Mhm.
That's where Mutual Community Savings Loan came out of Mechanics and Farmers Bank for that particular purpose, because banks didn't do home loans. They had to go to a specific community savings and loan company.
You know, as it relates to Mechanics and Farmers Bank, also it was mentioned earlier that they offered opportunities for you to start learning about money operations very early from East End School, because you would bring your little dimes in and the money was, and sometime we had a chance to visit Mechanics and Farmers Banks as children and make a deposit, which we just thought was so wonderful at that particular time. But this is something you don't see now if they do it at all.
I think
Yes, and I have made that suggestion to my banker, Mechanics and Farmers Bank, about this program. The one out on the boulevard, he wasn't aware that this program had existed in the public school systems for Black kids. So I don't know where it's gone from there. They haven't acted on it again, but he thought it was a very viable program. But I certainly was one of those ones that saved my nickels, dimes, and quarters on Wednesdays and turned it in to the teacher. And that's how I got my first band instrument in the 8th grade. By the time I got there, I had enough money to buy the instrument.
I agree.
So it was a very good program, and it was very thoughtful for them to even start it, to recognize, to help these kids understand that savings actually is a wonderful thing, not just spending it on Milky Ways and all those other things that Miss Aura store.
And I mean, the program was at not only East End, but it was all in all the historically Black elementary schools in the city. So this was not just something that did East End, but this was all over the. I went to W.G. Pearson and it was there. We had it there, like I said, you brought your little nickels and dimes, whatever, you know. It didn't amount to much, but if you kept it up over, like I said, years, the whole time you were there, and you didn't spend it on something, you know, like I said, you could buy a band instrument in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It made a nice Christmas present as well.
Mm-hmm.
It helped you get some of the things you wanted for Christmas. Yes, I agree.
Well, my parents did not allow me to touch that money until the 8th grade. They did not allow me to touch that bank book. So, you know, I was fortunate because we would not have been able to afford that instrument out of my dad's pocket, but we did with this savings account.
And I see in the picture there, they talk about Ann Atwater and C.P. Ellis. And when the school, you know, when the school burnt down in 1963, I was not old enough to remember that period, you know, going on. The only thing I do know about it was, you know, I heard about it, but, you know, the workings of what they did, I was not able to know about that. I did enjoy the movie. So I hope the movie was accurate, because I think it did a whole lot for East End Elementary School to be rebuilt.
Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
I saw, as I was telling the young lady in my initial interview with her, I saw the fire being set. I was coming home from Miss Aura's store one night, and that first classroom here on the right, it was Mr. Sowell's classroom, the only male elementary school teacher we had there.
Right.
And I know I saw something lit up in that classroom. So when I got home, I told my mom, I said, Mom, you know, I saw something like a fire in Mr. Sowell's classroom, like it was lit up and then it disappeared. And she just looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. So eventually, as the hours went on, the building started to burn. And we were up as kids who had to go to quit at school the next morning. We were up all night dealing with this fire. So I saw it and I reported it to my mother, but she didn't really think that I knew what I was talking about. But I think they eventually caught the arsonist that did this. I don't know.
There we have the other high schools in the area and the junior high. With it, junior high was the original Hillside High School. And I believe my father told me he graduated from there in 1936. And we all went, most of us went on to Hillside High School, and some went over to Durham High School. The tragedy about Hillside and the other areas was that this was an area, a school, only Black high school that we could attend. And there was no such thing as busing. There was busing, but you had to actually pay to go to Hillside.
Yes, you did.
You had to catch the bus, and they had 3 buses. One went to Walltown, one went to East End, and one went to Hickstown. And it was what, a quarter a day?
A quarter that you had to pay, yes, to get tickets. They would you get more tickets. It was a quarter. You didn't. It wasn't a day, but a quarter to get your tickets for X number of days.
Yeah.
And that got to be very old and not really good for my parents. So
Right.
that's why I left.
And I mean, like I said, people were busing. Now that everybody's got free busing, but back then when we went, we went in that area, there were, people like I said, Walltown, they went right past Durham High. I mean, right past it. They drove right past it.
Yep.
From all the way up the hillside into Whittier, because they were not allowed to go to Durham High until probably the late 60s. When did you go?
68, 67, 68.
I will.
That was the time I was one who was to go Hillside after I graduated from Whittier. Because of the geographical location, they reset and based on the area of this Old North Durham, I had to attend Durham High School. So I was, and that was back in 68. And so I was it was just me and a few more that had came over to Durham High when it first began to be integrated. And there was some real bad situations that occurred there as it relates to race relation that unfortunately took a war to bring the peace that was needed there. And I was one of the instrumental persons, because not that we had a bad reputation, but we just did not want anybody to beat up on us as was proposed and was tried. So I ended up going to Durham High, and that's where I graduated from.
Well, I went there not to integrate to school. I went there in '64 because of its proximity to my home on Dowd Street. I could walk from Dowd Street right on up to Duke Street without a problem. And actually, some of those parents, once they knew who I was, they would pick me up with their child. I didn't know who that kid was sitting in the car, but they would pick me up and take me and drop me off with them. There were only a few that would do that, but I went there for convenience, and I didn't go there to integrate. But I don't regret my experience there. It wasn't a day of wine and roses every day, but it was sometimes that things were ugly, and we knew we weren't appreciated. The only 2 people from Dowd Street that I can remember were there during this time was Claudia Dixon, whose house was right there on the corner of Elizabeth and Dowd, and me. And Claudia was an honor student, extremely good in mathematics and things like that. So she was there before I got there, and then but she got ill at some point and she left, but then she came back to graduate. So, but, I participated in the band, and I had no problems. I was the only Black person in the band the first year I went there. And there was no problems there. I made a lot of friends in that band. And those that didn't care for me, they didn't come near me.
Mr. Allen, you said this was back in 1964?
Yeah, in 1964, yes, they didn't have, it wasn't integrated. They had what they call freedom of choice.
Oh.
You could choose to go there. But
I chose, yes.
That's interesting, because I didn't know that piece of history. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
It was not integrated, that, like I said, if you lived in that area, you had to go there. But if you wanted to go there in 1964, because like I said, I graduated in '66 from Hillside, and it was strange because I don't know if you remember Lindsay Strudwick. Then decided to go over there. And about 2 days later, he was back at Hillside. I said, Lindsay, what happened? He got in a fight. He said, I'm sitting in the cafeteria and these people turned the tray over on me, and the fight broke out. And they didn't expel him. They sent him back to Hillside.
Oh, see, well, just the difference between that occasion and my situation. Another fight started in the cafeteria because the white guy wanted to take my lunch during the lunchtime, and I had to crown him for doing that. But the difference is they didn't invite me to go back to Hillside because I probably would have accepted that. But what they did, the principal came to me and says, I've got to expel you for 3 days. And I didn't start the fight. And he said, the only reason that I'm gonna expel you because I don't want blacks to come over here and think that they can start a fight or be in a fight and nothing happens to them. That's what was said.
Well, the white kids got away with things that we would be punished for when I was there. And I promptly had to tell a white teacher down near the band room, 3 of these little white boys ripping and running up and down the hall, bumped into his office door. I'm going the opposite direction with another friend of mine to the band room. He comes down there and says, I want to talk to you two about running into my door. I said, what run in your door? And so he said, you ran into my door. I said, no, you're not. I said, you are a lie. And I said, I'll go home and get my daddy and bring him back here. And you tell him that. I said, you knew very well those 3 white boys, you could hear them, ran into your door and ran on down the hall. I said, how can I run into your door when I'm going in the opposite direction? So I said, if you want to, let's go to the principal's office. We had one of the few principals that had a doctorate then, and he was very nice, but he didn't bother me after that when I told him, let's go to the principal's office. And I said, I'll have my father come over here. So that was the end of that. But those kids got away with a lot of things that we wouldn't get away with. People don't know that. Yeah, what was seen as a crime by us was not viewed as something criminal by them. It was, oh, they're just kids and, they're just acting out a little bit. That wasn't equality to me.
True. Yeah. And the same thing back in 1970. That's when I really actually, I would say, saw my first real live KKK Ku Klux Klan, because after that fight, I hurt the boy pretty good, and they had, that should have been documented because they called, the Klan said the Klans was coming over there, and they did show up, but me and my fellows, we had put ourselves in a condition that we would defend them off at all costs. But it took the police to intervene at that time because the principal was afraid to go out to face him. And so they called the police, and the police came, and that's them. Do otherwise, that would have been another piece of history where somebody would have got hurt. So there was activity of the Klan's involvement through some means out there to try to get blacks back into where they wanted them to be. And that was at Durham High.
I think a variation.
Well, because again, just thinking about the educational program, even to this day, I still have my 11th grade book report that I turned in, and I got a B+ on it. And I had made a friend with the white guy who didn't turn anyone in at all, and he got an A+ in that English class. I'll never forget that.
Well, yeah. Well, what happened to the lady who became Obama's attorney general? She graduated from Durham High School, but her father was a minister, and she graduated valedictorian. But he said when she was sworn in as the attorney general for Obama, that the school there, Durham High School, didn't want her to be the first black to be valedictorian. They wanted it to be a white person, but what they did was change some scores on a white girl's record to make her equal to this woman. And so they had two valedictorians instead of having this black girl be the original valed. And the black girl went on to Harvard. And she graduated law as well.
The
So,
picture you're seeing now is of the funeral home there at Dowd and Elizabeth Street. And up in the left-hand corner, you said East End Grocery Store. That was 1951. That was the original building was a grocery store down on the lower level, and on the upper level, there were 4 apartments up there. And this is that my grandfather built. The original building was built in 1950, and it was financed by North Carolina Mutual. So we were able, you know, as a business and people in the Durham area had access to capital. And that's something very, very important if you want to grow as a community and as a neighborhood. You know, when we were able to borrow money from the North Carolina Mutual, Mechanics and Farmers Bank, Mutual Community Savings. Like I said, a lot of Durham is very, very fortunate that we had capital and people had access to capital. That's a very, very important thing when you talk about the community.
Mr. Jones, but also that I remember right beside that was y'all funeral home, because that's where I remember your great-grandfather having a job, who showed me my first cadaver. You know, I wasn't ready for that. He walked me in, but it was a little house there sitting up a little bit on the hill, and that's where the funeral home was. I remember that as a child. So I think that's an important part of history also, rather than just this building, because I've seen that building go through several transitions
it's been quite a few things. The funeral home has been on Dowd Street, from my understanding, in 5 different locations. I know 2. People have told me about the other 3. This was way before my time, you know. From 1935, they said it was somewhere down the original building, somewhere down the East End School. Like I said, this was like I said, this was in 1935, so probably people told me about it. I don't remember it. But like I said, we've been on Dowd Street in several different locations. The present one.
I didn't know
that building that you just showed us also didn't it have a fish market in it on the side there? If that's where the fish market was as well. I remember
behind there
on Elizabeth side.
They did. Yes. The bottom on the lower level,
Right.
And then there was Mr. and Mrs. Daughtry's store was down there too. The Daughtry's opened up. They were there. And so, yes. So we had a really full service community if people would only take a look at it. I enjoyed it.
Oh yes, very, very, very much. Very self-efficient.
I just enjoyed it. I loved it.
This is East End Park and E.D. Mickle Community Center. Apparently this is when they were first building it. A little bit before my time. I don't recognize any of these people in the building here.
I don't even recognize the building. When we saw it, it was a building.
Yeah, when we saw it, it was a building. But, this was one
on Austin Avenue.
On Austin Avenue. But like I said, it had a ball, across the street there was a ball field and a play area. And like I said, Mr. Allen said he played a lot there. But comparatively speaking, it was lacking a lot of things, compared to what some of the other facilities in Durham had. Like I said, the premier for the Black area, I think it was W.D. Hill, was the premier recreational center.
Yes, it was. And they had the summer camps for kids. Hill had carried a summer camp for kids every summer. They would have it to give us something to do for the summer. It was an all-day thing, and they fed you lunch and everything. So, but over here, the thing is, right down the street was Long Meadow Park. They had everything. They had a swimming pool there and a nice park. We didn't have that. So,
Right, and it was a few years later before we could even attend any of the white parks, because even the YMCA and places like that wasn't obligated to go. That I think the only thing that we heard about was the YWCA. That wasn't nowhere close to us, so we didn't go.
Yes, no. But
the good part about those rec centers that was there for us, they provided us a lot of growth opportunities and taught us a lot of self-discipline. And so one of the greater skills that we have was social skills, that we learned to get along with. Of course, we had our differences, but for the most part, we still learned to be close to each other and to support each other, regardless whether we knew you or not. We just, if you was able to get to that area, that center, you was a part of the family.
Yes, you were. You were.
Like I said,
you certainly were.
Horseshoes and checkers was a big part of the community, and it is still now. There's a lot of horseshoes area in the area. I haven't seen too many checkers. They used to play checkers down at the McDonald's downtown, but I don't think they play anymore down there. I went down there and sat down, and I got beat so fast I didn't know I was beat. I thought I knew how to play
downtown Durham.
Yeah, I thought I knew how to play checkers. I sat down with these guys. I turned around and they said, "You get up."
Yeah, that was one of the part-time activities, because we was being very creative. We could not, at that particular time and during that era, we couldn't go to a lot of places that had a lot of other social games and stuff like that. So we had to be creative, and like you said, horseshoe, checkers, or I've got several pictures that I didn't tell the group that I'm an artist. And I've painted many of the things that we've already talked about, the way it used to be when I was a child. So hopefully that would be inclusive in what we are presenting here today, because I would love for them to see just how it is. Like one particular drawing, it shows where one family out of the whole community would get one place. You couldn't go to the street. You couldn't go beyond this point. You had a light to guide you when it's time to go home. But everybody got there, and each one of you had your own little game: hopscotch, lady jumping rope, and playing marbles, and whatever the sport was that you would do. And everybody did that at one spot, and then they went home. I thought that was so wonderful.
Now the thing about horseshoes, there is a horseshoe area in the East End area now. The problem is it's in between two $500,000 houses. And people own those $500,000 houses, and the surrounding people aren't too crazy about it. But right there on Down Street, there's a horseshoe. People play horseshoes.
I've seen it there. I want to make sure that's past you, going down Street,
right
on the other side of East End School. Is that
right correct? On the other side of East, right past the parking lot.
Yeah, okay, I know where you're
in the middle there. I don't know who owns a lot, but they're out there playing. And,
okay.
There's some big crowds out there sometimes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't go through that much. I like the times when you could go barefoot. My memories go back to being a little boy, barefoot. And we always had to get permission from my grandma. Mom, is it that time of the season I can go barefoot? Whoever's May, she said yes, but you didn't go until she said yes. I went to that park many a time barefoot, down Street to the stores barefoot. That was a way back then in that time. And it was very good. I felt so good growing up over there. I had a hard time adapting when I left that area. I really did, because a lot of the elderly people had started to die off, and there weren't people who were going to keep the dream possible still living there. And then those people moved out, and then all these other people started moving in, and then they started tearing down the homes. So it just hurts me to have to drive through there what few times I've been through there to see what's going on. Not like it was.
And this is a picture of Union Baptist Church today.
Right.
And in the left corner is a picture of the Union Baptist on Glendale Avenue. What is missing there was a church in between these two churches.
Right.
The church up at 904, which is attached to this church. They use that as an education building. But people tell me that back in the 1950s, when they actually bought that the land, that they had to get somebody to buy it for them, because like I said, they wouldn't sell it to a black person. So they had to get a white person to buy the land so that they could build a church on it. And I mean, and this, it wasn't just then. North Carolina Mutual, where the North Carolina Mutual is now, that property had to be bought by white folks. They wouldn't sell it to the black folks.
Wow.
So that's how far we have gone. But in 1965, they couldn't. There was at one point, and back in the 50s, there were no black folks living on Roxborough Street. Those houses were all white folks.
And prior to that, as well as Dow Street, prior to that, but prior to the 50s, this community here was all white, white possessed anyway. White owned, white lived, and stuff like that. There was no black folks like now going on that we see today, living on Dow Street. But as soon as I think it was after the integration started, then blacks could move into whatever areas. And when they start moving in, then whites start moving out to the rural area.
And you know what? Old Farm is a good example of that.
Yes.
When we integrated and we started moving in here, they moved out. And now on my street alone, I have at least 4 or 5 families that are white that have moved into this neighborhood. And all over this community, white people are moving back. But they moved out solidly, and I've been here 31 years. So, that's the way it turned. But that little area up there across where Dowd meets Roxborough, that section that goes on down to Cleveland Street, that used to be all white, as close as they were to us. That section was all white homes there, and on down Cleveland. So yes, that was white.
Right across the street from the Royal Ice Cream, before Long Florist was there during that particular time, there were several houses owned by this Jewish man, and he had made a public announcement that he would rather see his houses burned down before he allow a black to live in it. And that's exactly what happened when Martin Luther King got killed.
They burned it?
Yeah, the community burned the houses down. Doing the right, which was, again, it was an eyesore, and he used it. As a child, I went in there and kind of nosed around, and all he had was for storing stuff like school stuff, chairs and desks and a whole lot of, wasn't nothing valuable in there, but he just refused to allow blacks to live in it. That was his motto, that he'd rather see it burned down. And that's exactly what happened. All right.
And what you see now is a picture of Mount Gillian Church. This is down on Dow Street also. One of the 2 prominent churches in the neighborhood. And as we talked about it earlier, the members and the church leaders, lived in the community now. But that's not the case now, but they're still part of the community, and they still do a lot of things for the community.
I'm going to speak bluntly about that. I need to see that.
Not as much as they should.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm not condemning the church, but the activity as community involvement, I don't think that's prominent today, like back in the days that you was talking about early, doing the Reverend's, the other Reverend's ring. But right now we have lost a very valuable asset from that church as community involvement. We really have, because I've been on to them on several occasions. As a matter of fact, I had to end up discussing about, because they really wanted to destroy a part of the community just to build the church bigger. And I had to fight them for that. So, and other issues that I had brought up early. Again, I'm not condemning the church for the action. I'm just saying that my point is the involvement back in earlier times versus the involvement of the church today is not the same. That's what I'm saying.
Like I said, they're not the same because, like I said, most of the people don't live in the community.
That's right.
Back in our day,
A lot of them have died away.
Yeah, the people didn't live in the community. Now they don't live. So
that's right.
Community involvement is not what it was or should be.
Right.
Right. Now we have a picture of, some of the civic leaders of the area, Mr. Holloway and my grandfather, Mr. Jones. They worked in the area in the Durham East End betterment community, trying to get things done for the community. My grandfather, he was a member of the recreation committee for the city, when they were doing things with E.D. Mickle. I remember he used to tell me they had to fight for everything, if they wanted a street light, a tennis courts, or anything. When it went to the meetings, he was one of 8. So,
right.
He was by himself, so he didn't have anybody to go with him, to fight that fight. We also have Miss Josephine Turner. She was very active in the community, the NAACP, the Community Development Board. She worked on the YWCA board, and she was involved in a lot of city activities. She was on a lot of city boards, and she also ran for city council. And like I said, lived in the community down on Hanover Street. We also have Mrs. Jenny Lucas. She was my high school drama teacher.
Okay.
And she went on to become a state senator. I believe she was,
right.
when she passed away, she was probably the number 3rd senator in the state in prominence there, So,
she really was.
She was and did a lot for the area. And like
Well,
I said, go ahead.
I'd like to say, Bob, Mr. Holloway and his wife are prime examples of the goodness we had in that community, because his wife was my 1st grade teacher. Miss Holloway, John L. Holloway's wife, was my 1st grade teacher. And, when I talk about that community, I still can tell you the names of every teacher that was there in the 1950s as I went through that school and where their classrooms were. That is how they had on me for learning.
Right.
And those Black teachers really taught us the best they could do with the menial aspects that the public school system. We had hand-me-down books and hand-me-down this, but those teachers made the most of what they had, and we were taught the best that we could be taught. I enjoyed my 6 years at East End Elementary, and I loved every teacher that I had there. They were wonderful, and they were well positioned to be teachers.
I agree.
And they named the school after Jenny Lucas. Lucas Middle School is named after her.
Yes, out there. I know it's not far from where I live out here. It's out down from me, where I live. Yes, Lucas Middle School. You're correct.
Now, this is a picture of Royal Ice Cream. This was on the corner of Dowd and Roxborough Street. It was an ice cream parlor. As the front door right there that you see, that was it for the white customers.
That's
White customers had to go around to the back. And it was a back door in the back and probably a little closet back there where they served ice cream to Black folks. And you couldn't go around to the front. And like I said, in 1957, they did do a civil, march there, and there was a court case that was involved in that, and they won that court case. And
Ms. Jones, do you know I was walking in that ticket right there?
Well, okay.
I sure was. I was there. I may not have been there on that day that they did it, but I walked that line as well up on the Roxborough side. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
as a matter of fact, if the pictures reveal more, you could see Miss Kalina Smith in that picture as well. If they really showed it the way I think I seen her picture up there. Well, but the day that they was marching, what we did was like you came and marched on a certain day and a certain hour, and then you change up the venue and have someone else come in. So when they took this picture, I was not in there, but I was in that mark, and I was about that age right there where when that picture was taken. So I
Wow.
remember the distinction of everything about that. I really do.
Mhm.
Yeah. And they, you know, the building has since been torn down. That area now is part of Global Scholars Academy. It's a charter school. It's in that same area right there. And the plaque there is right there on Roxborough Street.
Well, you know,
Mhm.
that after they closed the Royal ice cream, there was a company that works Mayola still had ice
Yes.
cream
Right.
place in there now,
You're right.
and so they took over, and that's when Mr. Charles Dunnan he offered to use the building after it became integrated the way it was. And he ran his business until he finally bought the building and he sold it back, I think, to the church for the purpose of the school for their expansion or whatever.
Right.
But that I think that's Charles Dunn is also important figure to this community as a part of the transition and the growth, because he himself also offered a lot of opportunity to blacks in this community after, like I said,
Mhm.
after things had settled down. He was feeding people
Mhm.
all over Durham, homeless people and everybody else. And I still have some of his dishes and stuff that since he left, and I have the copies of when that was being destructed. I mean, being torn down. So I think Charles Dunnan's name should be somewhere in this history line because for years he was there servicing the community, and he was a very
Yeah.
influential person.
That he
Yeah,
was.
I remember him. Yes.
Now, like I said,
Good
this
guy.
picture, I'm not sure when it was taken. Looking at the clothes, it was probably before my time and Arthur's time, you know. But, you know, like I said, this is a picture, they said, of civil rights activists from the high school and from North Carolina Central. So, you know, there was a lot of activity, you know, around Hillside and with the students at Central during the civil rights movement.
Mhm. I wonder, does my brother Moses live in Michigan? Because he's older than I am, and he graduated from North Carolina Central, so he may have some insight. I'll ask him about it when I talk to him. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now,
Now,
this, go ahead, Arthur.
no, I'm just still flabbergasted about this picture. I just,
This is what's going on in East End area now. This is what we call gentrification, where they are tearing down existing houses and building brand new houses, you know, houses that people lived in. I know one lady, they just, you know, after her mother passed, they just, she said they were calling her every day, just sending her letters, you know, and she finally sold the house. I mean, as soon as she sold it, they tore it down and built a $500,000 house there, you know. That's what they're doing to the houses. And for, you know, the problem is,
you know specifically where that is on Dow Street?
no, I'm not sure that's on Dow Street, but I was talking
I
about,
don't think that's Dowd.
no, that's not Dow Street, but I was on the, what I was talking about was the house right on it, Dowd and Rocks and Austin Avenue.
Mhm.
Not the in-house, but the second house up there. But I mean,
Yes.
on Dow Street, probably now between the 500 and 800 block, there probably maybe be 2 or 3 black families in that 3-block area. You know, all of those houses have been renovated and, like I said, resold. So they're probably, like I said, not that many, you know, black families living on that side of Dallas. And, problem is,
okay.
like I said, the taxes. You know, if you own the house as rental property, you know, it's not. The taxes have gotten so high that you can't afford to rent it out at a reasonable rate. You have to either raise the rate or, you know, sell it out to a homeowner, you know, to a builder. There are plenty of builders out here that want to come in there. I was noticing the house the other day, it was $515,000 for a 1,600 square foot house.
Right.
Oh God.
With no garage.
That's
and
right.
not much land.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no yard.
No yard, no garage, you know.
Yeah. It's all in the style that they are putting up, and again, it's more of a tradition. Being in the building myself, it's more of a tradition that's more favorable to what a white person would live in versus a black family, because again, back in the day, we had more children and we needed more space, more land. Even though if you had to live next door to a person, you still had a plenty of land. But the fact of the matter is now, they're not even trying to entertain that as a means of black family survival.
Now, my question is going to be to these new families, and most of them are young. They're young families moving in, and of course, like I said, they have very small children. And where are they going to send those kids to school? Are they going to send them the East Way? You know,
No.
that's my question. You know, that's the next question. You know, where are you going to send these kids at?
Well, you know, I would respond to that because of the notoriety of Global Academy across the street. I'm seeing a lot of, I take that word back, not a lot, but some of the community, but they're most so Latinos. And if I'm using the proper word, because I don't want to call that out of order either. But the fact of the matter is, they are going there, and many of the whites that's moved in the area, they walk by, they be friendly, you know, walk the dog, run, and doing everything else. But that's a good question. I'm going to ask, when your kids, where you plan to send your kids? That's a good question. I'm going to ask some of my friends that I know already about that.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And I like the spin that I think that's originally supposed to be questions to you all, but that you post questions to the community. I like that. I like that spin on that, which I think is really good. In the past, people have asked us questions around how are we going to continue to share and recognize this history, especially as things change. So thank you all. I'm going to wrap up really quickly. So I have this slide. I think we are sharing in chat. This was our 11th event. We started our community stories in July of last year. And so we're about to come to our 1-year anniversary, which will be this coming July. And we just really want to learn, kind of get some feedback from people on how the events have gone, what your favorite parts are, and any suggestions you have for improving these events, as well as suggestions for future communities and people to include in our future conversations. So I think my coworkers have shared that link in the chat. If you'd please take a moment, we really appreciate the things that you have to say, and we'll definitely use that to shape our next year of these events. So again, I want to thank all of my coworkers who've helped to put this together, as well as our department leadership for supporting this work. I'm hoping that at least one of them will probably join us for our event in June. And then again, today's speakers, Mr. Jones, Mr. Everett, and Mr. Allen. And I'm sorry that Ms. Fisher wasn't able to join us, but thank you so much for all that you're able to share, even if it's probably just the very tip of the iceberg for the community. But it's this is my favorite time of the month to sit and hear and learn from everyone. So thank you.
I have a question. Where did that go from here?
I'm getting there. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but thank you. That's a good prompting. Almost there. So coming up for next month, we are going to kind of have, we're calling it a reunion of the communities that we've featured so far. So hopefully some of today's speakers will also be joining us next month, as well as residents from Brookstown, the Bottom, College Heights, and Merrickmore. And then in July, we're partnering with Durham Parks and Rec to do an episode on W.E. Hill Recreation Center, as Mr. Allen was talking about the importance of it being a community center and all the things that people did there. And can't see the rest of my screen. We're always looking for suggestions for other communities, especially if you have recommendations around people who grew up in the Stokesdale area or Pearsontown or other communities that you think should be spotlighted. There's my contact information and our website. So these continue to live on. We have a YouTube page where so far we've had over 4,000 people between our live recordings, the YouTube page, and then they're also shown on the TV, the kind of government access channel. So if you flip through there, sometimes you'll see it. But if you have, and I think this is something probably we'll talk about in our June event, continue to talk about how it's more than just these recordings, other ways to continue sharing the story, sharing stories. Mr. Everett, when we were rehearsing, you named several people that aren't even in the slides that should be there and should be part of this history. So that's something that we're trying to think on, how we can continue to support that and make sure that these stories live on, and the photos that people have and things like that are there and are shared more broadly. So that's something, please let us know your suggestions on how we can continue to do that.
I just have one more last question that I think this is very important. Will there at any point be inclusive the ideologies or the opinions or the actions of whites who lived during this course of time? Because I know most of this, our surroundings was African American, but does white have input, or do they not want to be involved in such things? I like for things to be diverse so that it won't be an argument say, well, this ain't this and that. But if you had a chance to speak and elect not to, that's your choice. But the fact of the matter is, I think it should be inclusive of everyone, even though they may have had the upper hand, it's still good to hear their version.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. That's really good. I had a similar conversation with one of my leadership earlier today, and I think that we started these as trying to be a space where we didn't see these histories, and we're really wanting to dedicate space just to that. But I would love to talk with you more about how you envision that and how we can do that in a way that people will still continue to be really honest and respectful of each other, and whatever else, how we can do that. But I think that's a larger piece of the city's work that we're trying to do around racial equity and healing. And you're really good at just already being 2 steps ahead and prompting us for other things. So I would love to continue to talk with you about that.
Certainly. Thank you.
So again, thank you to the city for supporting this work. Our website is durhamcommunityengagement.org. One day I'm going to have that right on all of the slides. And our Facebook, where you can already see the recording from today, Durham Community Engagement. And that's it.